So now we're at the break, which gives us, and more importantly, GM Dana Brown, opportunity to reflect on the team and its needs, which naturally leads to suspense around what will happen at the trade deadline. So last week, we got a report from Jim Bowden that the Astros have spoken to the Mets about Luis Severino and Pete Alonso, the Diamondbacks about Christian Walker, and the Cubs about Cody Bellinger. So outside of Severino's name, seems like first base is a target, if we believe that report. Do you think, Charlie, that the interest is more about maybe being more probable that they could make a trade for a bat more than an arm? And does that really fix what ails Houston?
Their priorities in order approaching this trade deadline, which is just 2 weeks out now. 1, starting pitching, 2, starting pitching, 3, starting pitching. It's fun to play fantasy baseball, and some fantasies, as in rumors, become reality, but there's just way more rumor, idle gossip from an ex-general manager like Jim Bowden, who's obviously well-connected and does plenty of baseball media, an accomplished writer like Bob Nightingale. It's a gossip game. There's a lot of stuff. Executives, former colleagues of Bowden or sources of Nightingale, they're going to put out what they want to put out. And they also know that there's a media cycle, a media monster that sometimes need to be fed. So more than 90% of stuff that's out there, there's either nothing to it or it's not going to happen. Specifically to a couple of the names linked with the Astros. The Mets hold a wild card spot at the All-Star break. They're not trading Pete Alonso unless they're getting something that they think is at least a level trade-off on their major league roster, right? Leave aside, they're in the New York media market they share with the Yankees. Any market, you're holding a wild card position. And while Alonso did not have a big first half of the season, he's still a middle of the order bat of quality. They're not going to just trade him for a couple of prospects. And we always need to include that for the higher end trade targets, a number of teams can easily outbid the Astros in prospect quality because of the state of the Astros system. Or if the Astros are willing to raise the bar on the quality of prospects that the Astros have, well, that would be doing more damage to the Astros farm system than if, say, the Orioles offered up their 4th and 5th best prospects, who are better than the Astros' top 2 prospects in terms of how major league talent evaluators grade these guys. So Alonso, that would stun me. The Arizona Diamondbacks are the reigning National League champions. They're within a game of the wild card. They're not trading Christian Walker for a couple of prospects. How are you going to quit on your season to an extent if you're the defending National League champions in a market that's not an inherently great baseball market? How's that going to go with the ticket buying public in Phoenix? The Cubs are absolutely in striking range because in the National League, almost everyone other than the Rockies and Marlins is, and maybe the Nationals aren't. So Cody Bellinger, the Cubs are within 3.5. He'd be a great fit for the Astros. He's better than Singleton. He'd also be another left-handed outfield option if you wanted to covet that. Bellinger's already said, I could let bygones be bygones. Astros fans would feel the same, by the way, if Bellinger came here and produced. But I'm not feeling it as a match with the Astros. I think other teams could come in over the top on them fairly easily. The one name that would make some sense, and by the way, Bellinger has a $28 million option for next year that he could pick up if he comes here and stinks and says after Boris screwed over his market value. I don't think the Astros want to risk being on the hook for Bellinger at $28 million next year while they're paying Abreu $19.5. Vlad Guerrero Jr. would make sense if Toronto decides we're going to tear down, we're going nowhere, right? Guerrero, you'd have him for this run. Next year, before he becomes a free agent at a cost of 18 to 20 million, if you're willing to swallow on that. If you know you're not paying Bregman, you're peeling that 20 million off. Verlander now, you're not on the hook for his 17.5 million because he's not getting to 140 innings this year. And in not a worst case scenario, but a suboptimal case scenario, if Bregman's out and you traded for Vlad Guerrero Jr., he can play third base. A poor third base, but third base, if you don't come up with something better at third base and you don't want Vlad at first because you have Singleton, Loperfido, whatever else. So, you can juggle a lot of balls in the air. You're not going to catch many of them. And I just ran through the first baseman because those are the names that are, I guess, a little sexier guys who hit a lot of home runs and they're in the lineup every day. And Vlad Guerrero's a former MVP. Whose presidential line was it? Or it was ascribed to a president dealing with his problems? It's the economy, stupid. It's starting pitching, stupid.
I was going to say the same thing as Charlie. He took the words right out of my mouth. Pitching. And I get it. Pete Alonso, New York market, big home run hitter. That's going to get page views. That's interesting to people. That's not the same as going after a back of the rotation starter, which is what the Astros really need. And to the Verlander point, if he's no lock to come back next year, Dana Brown has said that he prefers not to trade for rentals. You have to wonder if the Astros are like, maybe we need a pitcher that could be a back of the rotation guy, not only this year, but next year too. Because if Verlander walks, and who knows if Arrighetti is going to be ready to come back next year, you'd probably like to have a better option. I know he hasn't been bad, but his ERA is over 5. It's a lot to ask from a young pitcher. So I think not just this year, but maybe next year too, they might be looking for a starting pitcher that can at least give them some innings, give them an opportunity to win some ball games. So that's where I'm looking if I'm Dana Brown. We got to get some more arms in here. And we already talked about the Ronel Blanco stuff, and the innings are piling up. Hunter Brown, he's done it before barely, but this is the first time we've really seen him for a long stretch look like a top of the rotation pitcher. So there's just a lot of unknown here. And then to put a cap on it, what we're hearing about Luis Garcia and Lance McCullers, that's terrifying. Like, I can't count on Lance McCullers to ever come back. So Luis Garcia, hopefully it's just a little hiccup, but you got to be thinking big picture here if you're Dana Brown. We got to get some more arms in here, especially if Verlander's not going to come back, and 2 other starters are a big question mark. So that has to be the priority. I wonder if the first base stuff is just kind of noise out there to maybe throw people off the scent, but I don't think you could throw anybody off the scent. If you're another GM in MLB and you're looking at the Astros and seeing what their rotation is, what their obstacles are, and their injuries, and how McCullers and Garcia may not be coming back anytime soon, they know the Astros need pitching. You're desperate. You're just going to have to bite the bullet and give up what you have to get up to patch that hole.
Yeah, the Astros prioritizing first base over starting pitching right now wouldn't be quite as ridiculous as if Seattle said, we think we're going to try to strengthen our rotation and not worry about our lineup. But it would be close, right? As we race toward the deadline, it could well decide this division. Do the Mariners add more offense than the Astros add one more capable starter? Hey, the Astros could win this thing with their roster status quo. They've climbed within 1 game without Tucker, without Verlander, so they could do it. But not Dana Brown, or not anyone who has rooting interest in the Astros should be thinking, I'm just solid with Arrighetti and Bloss as my 4 and 5 starters. Look, no teams have 5 starters that you're thinking they're all rock solid, they're really good. But the Mariners certainly have 4, and Brian Wu or Emerson Hancock is a more capable 5th than the Astros have a 4th, at least off what they've done to this point. The Phillies absolutely have 4, while the Phillies are by far the best team in baseball right now. So, it's not that the Astros are doomed if they don't make an acquisition, but it's said about managers or coaches that their job is to put players in the best positions to succeed. The general manager's job is to piece together the best roster to give the manager the best opportunity to put the players in the best positions to succeed. And if Dana Brown, said it before, I'll say it again, if Dana Brown does not add a starting pitcher by the deadline on that specific criterion, he will have epically failed. It doesn't mean the season is then condemned to be a failure, but Dana Brown has to acquire a starting pitcher. The good news is I think we all think he knows this.
Well, Rafael Montero for Pete Alonso straight up. Who's saying no? Oh, them? Okay. Well, look, we've talked about this privately. Outside of Verlander, how many times have any of the names tied to the Astros and trade rumors ever materialized? The answer is none. It's never happened. We've never had an idea of who that big acquisition was going to be. There's been a lot of names, none of them materialized. And the Verlander thing was a very unique circumstance because they basically put it out there for God and the world to see that they were selling, and Scherzer went first. So that was a very unique circumstance. Josh, you alluded to it. We've talked about how these leaks sometimes, are smoke screens to throw people off the scent. It would take a Chernobyl level of smoke to throw anyone off the fact that Houston needs arms at this point. Charlie, you mentioned the Seattle series bearing down. We talked in the first part about Texas is getting healthy and they're on the come now. How critical is this series coming up with Seattle? You come out of the break against them. How critical is this series to set the tone early? And then how dangerous do they become if they do go and get that bat?
Important, not critical. First addressing Astros Mariners. It feels to me like it's more critical to Seattle, actually, in that the Mariners just woeful going into the break, losing 3 out of 4 to the Angels. Right? They're fortunate the Astros dropped the last 2 to the Rangers, or the Mariners would either have company at the top of the division or be behind the Astros. Instead, they still have a 1-game lead. And again, perspective and timing. If opening day, the Mariners were offered a 1-game divisional lead coming out of the All-Star break, we'll take it. I'm sure from a Mariners perspective, but when you had a 10-game lead inside a month ago, and I think it will be both demoralizing and a reality of you've left yourself short if they don't go add a meaningful bat or two. And their farm system is in vastly better condition right now than the Astros with the cards that they can play and going after an acquisition or two. So we'll see what they do there. If the Astros get swept in Seattle, they're 4 out. So it's not like, it's over. Conversely, if they sweep, they're only 2 games ahead, and it'll feel like the Astros have all the momentum in the world. Well, we've covered that before. Momentum, you have it until you don't. See Seattle a month ago. See the Astros a month, 6 weeks ago. I'm interested, and we touched upon it briefly in part 1 this week. If you're Joe Espada and powers that be maybe above him, how do you line up your pitching in this series? Right? Qualitatively, it's simple. You go Ronel Blanco game 1, Hunter Brown game 2, Framber Valdez game 3. But with the workload stuff in mind, I think I'd throw Framber in game 1, buy an extra day's rest for each Blanco and Brown, and then whichever order you choose to go with him. I would think Blanco's just been the better guy all year long, though Brown, save the 1 hiccup start, 2 back, has been better over the last month. I'm sure Seattle will be lining this up, knowing it's a very important series. Remember, the Mariners have beaten the Astros 5 out of 7 so far this year. So if Seattle takes 2 out of 3 in this series, the Mariners clinch the head-to-head tiebreaker. If it comes down to that in the end, and we know Astros Rangers, that's exactly what it came down to in the end last year. So it's certainly a very important series, but will still only be in the back half of July. It's not vital. And Astros Mariners play 3 at Minute Maid Park the last week of the season. The Rangers probably hoping that nobody sweeps it, right? Let the Astros actually take 2 out of 3, which would leave the Astros and Mariners tied. And if the Rangers are doing a business of their own, they'd be guaranteed to gain ground on one or the other if they take 2 out of 3 to start the second half themselves. Astros Rangers have just one more head-to-head series in Arlington in early August. The Mariners and Rangers have a couple of series left head-to-head. So there's a lot of yarn to still unspool in this race.
It looks like to me, unless the Astros get hit with another wave of injuries, which you can't rule it out, it's been happening all year, but I think this is going to kind of go down to the last few games of the season. It just kind of like it did last year. So, as far as the trade deadline, it's, the Astros have the best OPS out of the Mariners and the Rangers, but they have the worst ERA out of those 3 teams. So clearly an upgraded pitching is what the Astros need to do here. And it's just counting on Verlander to come back at his age and pitch the rest of the season healthy. You're really kind of rolling the dice there. And, we mentioned the other guys coming back from injury, who knows? So I just think pitching has to be the focus. And yeah, it's not the end of the world, if they got swept in the series against the Mariners, but boy, after losing that series to the Rangers before the All-Star break, if you come out and get swept by the Mariners, all that positivity that was kind of coming with the Astros over the past several weeks, that kind of falls to the wayside a little bit. Some of the shine comes off of that. So they need to come out. And I'm kind of with Charlie. Before he said it, I was like, let's go with Framber out there in that first game. Give Blanco, a little extra rest. Framber has been your ace in the past. Let him go out, do his thing. Hopefully he doesn't get any ground balls hit to him that he sails over the first baseman's head or anything like that. But, outside of that, you can trust Fromber that on most days, he's going to give you a quality start.
There's clearly more pressure on Seattle, at least for this point in a season going into this series. And then the bigger picture, right? The Astros acquisitions for the stretch run, you're hoping are absolutely Kyle Tucker. You hope Verlander to some extent, and starting pitcher to be acquired, right? The Rangers, Jacob deGrom is kind of their Verlander. They're hoping to get him back in August. There's also Tyler Mahle. Scherzer's been back and looked pretty good over his first 5 starts as he's still building up. And the Rangers are hoping to get Josh Young, their stout rookie third baseman, who played 4 games this season before ex-Astro Phil Maton shattered his wrist with a pitch. Young hasn't gotten back yet. Right, his fill-in, Josh Smith, has actually been the Rangers' best player this season, but they'll move Smith around the field. Young comes, that's a big bat acquisition for them. The Mariners, what is going to be their move? They have the best rotation. They have by far the worst lineup, the worst team batting average in baseball. So I think the pressure, the burden, the bullseye, it's all on the Mariners to upgrade. If I get a dual entry between the Astros and Rangers, if Seattle doesn't add either of the 2 bats, I think they should be trying to acquire, but at least one. I'm certainly taking the Astros or Rangers, if not both, to go ahead of them. And individually, if you tell me the Mariners are not going to add a quality bat, can be a dangerous word to use, but it feels like you get Tucker back, you get Verlander back a little bit, that the Astros should win the division again, unless the Rangers just really roll through, take the season series from the Astros, and make their title defense legit.
Yeah, that is the danger of saying should, because I think a lot of Astros fans thought the Astros would be in worst situation, and they have been with Tucker down, but they've been able to make this run with Tucker down. So they've been able to power through it. And I guess if you're looking for bright sides here, Josh and I, we've discussed this before. If JV can stay healthy, he's saved a lot of innings on his arm this season while he's been battling through the neck injury. So perhaps that plays in Houston's favor down the stretch. As you're pitching deeper into the season, maybe his arm's a little fresher as long as that neck can stay healthy. So,
fears like Javier, the neck connects to the arm somehow, and that's why it's taking so long for Verlander to get back from a stiff neck.
Yeah, well, exactly. And given the just secretive nature of Houston, we don't really know what is really ailing him. But again, fingers crossed, we'll have to wait and see how that all plays out. That's going to be it for this episode of Stone Cold Stros. If you listen on podcast, you enjoy the show, please be sure to give us a 5-star rating wherever you get your podcast from. Josh, Charlie, and I will catch you next week. But you don't have to wait that long to get your Houston Sports Fix. All you have to do is subscribe to Sports Map Houston and Sports Map Texans on YouTube. We'll have more content for you during the week. Thanks for listening. Until next time, go Stros.